ain't know a lot about you this week.
I thought we weren't allowed to do the joke.
Oh.
You were the one that said we can't make those jokes.
When it's me,
now all of a sudden Demaris can make the jokes that she said don't make.
cut out. When it's me, leave it in there. We all go down.
I ain't going down with shit.
You going down. Now they canceling your too. Your Twitter's deleted. Your TikTok
when Rory's around.
And I want anybody else listening to this, we don't think that funny. We laugh to hide our pain.
Following Rory's cancellation, Rory, Demaris, and Mal had an uncomfortable conversation. Indeed, following the original apology, they confronted head-on on a recent episode of the Rory and Mal podcast.
I think my intentions came off the correct way. I sounded very, very dismissive in the beginning.
Rory would apologize, but that was before all the other tweets. The tears that were hidden behind the laughter were definitely visible. Demaris would later make a joke about how much she had learned about Rory this week as a result of this talk, a reference to the tweets about Rory and his history, of course. And he would discuss these topics in one of the most bizarre settings ever. Additionally, it was most likely a masterclass in everything that should not be done. To relive the moment, here are a few of the clips.
Do it or don't. This white motherfucker get his up here and explain why he thought it was okay.
I'm so angry though.
Do it or don't. Now speak your motherfucking mind. Do it or don't. Do it or don't. Because I promise your motherfucking
Do it or don't.
Ain't nobody can save you white.
Rory would then have more tweets come to light. The entire industry would discuss it. Rory's position in the culture would be the subject of numerous thought pieces. Later on, there would also be a discussion concerning Demaris' actions and demeanor, since she would take the stage and restrain Rory.
Rory, yeah, but you not gonna accuse me of motherfucking lying about nothing. You're not gonna accuse me of lying about you weird. I don't gotta lie about getting got.
Rory, not me, girl.
Ever get in this mother and you gotta go to sleep every night knowing that.
Other people like Gina would feel the same way. I refer to the entire area. Rory pleaded with his friends in the industry to stand up for him, and they did. However, they are now dealing with the fallout. However, Rory even exclaimed, "Hey, Demaris, I thought you said we wouldn't joke." This episode showed a great deal of angst and hostility regarding how things transpired. Additionally, Rory has an intriguing personality. He manages his insecurities by seeming not to be disturbed even when he is. I am aware that when I engage in lighthearted or humorous conversations with Rorian, I will land a shot or joke and he will become defensive and irritated. However, he will then pretend that he is not defensive and upset and say, "Oh, I don't care, I'm kidding." When he attempted to defend his tweets in front of Kendrick Lamar supporters, this strategy and defense mechanism totally backfired on him. However, Demaris' remarks were even more intriguing. "She's not going down," she declared. These days, everyone attempts to discuss topics like, "Oh, these podcasters are joking." No, the subconscious mind is always visible during any kind of conversation. Furthermore, I believe that she shouldn't give in to Rory's tweets because of the marriage. Additionally, based on her previous statements regarding her perception of herself as a black woman, I believe she's quite offended by how she seemed when she went up there to fight for Rory. It's also important to keep in mind that Rory not only requested Demaris' defense, but also undermined it by keeping her silent. I know that he only prevented her from doing her thing rather than actually shutting her up. When she said, "All right, dude, give up treating this as a joke. This is getting worse because of you." Rory not only requested her defense, but he also handled it carelessly after receiving it. The barrister feels that she shouldn't go down because she shouldn't go down with the ship, and she's entirely correct. She was actually holding Rory down, but Rory didn't do the same to her. That's all on Rory then. We all go down, Peach goes down, everyone is going to fall, and Mal would now create illusions for the jokes and other things. And I believe that Mal is grieved by this, but in a Mal kind of way. I'm not sure if he's depressed, but he probably just believes that Rory made a foolish decision by making it worse. And he presumably believes that all of this could have easily been avoided if it weren't for Spaces. You must also remember that Rory ignored Mal and Demaris' constant warnings to stay away from Spaces. So if Rory had held off Spaces, might this have been prevented? Of course. But those tweets were going to be hauled to the carpet, and those Kendrick Lamar supporters were going to come for him. But the Spaces just turned it into audio. We can now constantly reflect on that period of time and ask ourselves, hey, what was Rory thinking? This is absurd. Without the oral version of that living forever, the hubris and smugness would not have been as noticeable. And Rory begins to sing, but it sounds like a nervous joke. Right now you can see it here.
When Rory's around, Rory's around.
And As you can see, the program seems to have been rocked ever since this occurred. If their opinions fade, only time will tell. I am aware that they have lost roughly 1,000 subscribers, which isn't much, but you can tell that they have been making an effort to change. Rory's account has been deactivated. He has entirely vanished from Spaces, and I doubt we will see him again for a while. I was informed by someone who claimed to be drinking on Spaces, which is why he behaved that way. However, I think it goes beyond that. I almost believe that Rory would still act in this manner if he weren't intoxicated. This is kind of his thing. This is his purse. He's conceited. He's arrogant. I am accused of the same thing. However, he simply believes that people in Places are beneath him, as do many podcasters, and that's how it turned out. I now know that many people are saying things like, "Yo, these people are unemployed," in both my comment area and numerous remark sections about Spaces. These folks are failures. However, these are only auditory representations of the listeners rather than real physical ones. They're basically the chronology if it could talk, which is really entertaining even though I know it's awful. So much so that many of the patrons believe the Spaces are more interesting than the podcasts we actually listen to, such as The Joe Budden Show and Rory and Mal. However, do share your thoughts on this embarrassing on-air interaction. In essence, what you're witnessing is them coming to terms with how their show will be perceived going forward. They seem to have a tremendous crash out every year. Recall that Eden punched Julian a few years ago, that Julian was sacked from the program the following year, and that Rory was canceled this year. These guys seem to have a trick up their sleeve, and occasionally they are unable to contain it. My main complaint is that they would deal with it on Spaces rather than the pod. Not this one, nor the cancellation one, with Julian getting attacked and Julian getting fired. Additionally, I think that if you're going to embrace the mess, you should do so on the platforms where you can make money. And the idea that Rory on Spaces is some of what he wants to be on the show is a good one, in my opinion. Mal most likely didn't want to speak to Julian on his podcast, even though he most likely wanted to. He said, "I'm going to go on Spaces where I can't be controlled and be allowed to be a little bit more creative, put myself in my Joe Budden COE bag." However, the tweets blew up in his face because, well, that's just the way things are. In reality, you can't COE your way out of that situation. However, in this case, it would have been wise to remain on the podcast alone. But please share your thoughts in the comments section. Do you think Demaris has any feelings about how things transpired? She can't truly hold Rory accountable because in the end, she is paid by both Rory and Mal, so she did her best. In addition to being paid by Rory and Mal, I think Demaris, who's previously Rory's helper, assisting him with the organization of his musical company, and perhaps even connecting with him since the days of Hanny Palua, who would later become Duce Palua. She felt obligated to restrain him as a result. However, I believe the most absurd tragedy of the entire situation was Rory's inability to even hear Demaris's pleas for him to simply let her do her job. He also spoke on her behalf. She tried to defend him, but he prevented her from doing so. Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Do you still think Mal and Rory have a chance? Do you think this tweet wasn't that big of a deal? Do you think that this Twitter incident was significant enough that you removed him entirely from your rotation? Although their audience is limited, Rory and Mal have a devoted following. Thus, I believe they will still endure. At some point, I think Rory and Mal won't be able to close agreements, and that's when the fun will start. It will just be a war of attrition. How long will Rory Mal be able to pod without a Studio 71, a Sirius, a Volume, or any of these checks coming into a system and get them advertisements? The games will start at that point. However, I'm not sure how long they will last.